The bayou stretched for hundreds of miles through southern Louisiana, a labyrinth of waterways, cypress swamps, and dense vegetation that had concealed smugglers and fugitives for centuries. In this unforgiving terrain, a man who understood the land's secrets could disappear completely, living off the resources the swamp provided while evading even the most determined pursuit. Federal investigators believed such a man was hiding there now, a high-ranking cartel leader who had orchestrated drug trafficking operations that moved billions of dollars worth of cocaine and methamphetamine into the United States over a 15-year period. The fugitive's empire had stretched from South America through Central America and Mexico, with distribution networks reaching every major American city. His organization employed thousands, from farmers who grew coca in remote Andean valleys to street dealers in Chicago and New York. The violence required to maintain this empire was staggering. Hundreds of murders, disappearances, and acts of intimidation designed to eliminate rivals and silence witnesses. When a federal grand jury returned indictments charging him with racketeering, murder conspiracy, and narcotics trafficking, he vanished before arrest warrants could be executed. Intelligence suggested he had fled to Louisiana, specifically to the Atchafalaya Basin, the largest wetland in the United States. The region's isolation and complexity made it ideal for someone seeking to avoid capture. Generations of families had lived in the basin, their homes accessible only by boat, their livelihoods dependent on fishing, trapping, and activities that required intimate knowledge of waterways that shifted with seasons and weather. Among these communities, the fugitive had apparently found sanctuary, either through financial inducement or through family connections that predated his criminal career. U.S. Marshals established a task force dedicated to locating and apprehending him. The challenge was immense. The Atchafalaya Basin covered nearly 1 million acres of swamp, bayou, and bottomland hardwood forest. Traditional surveillance methods were useless in terrain where roads barely existed and where someone familiar with the land could detect outsiders immediately. Helicopters and drones were limited by dense tree canopy that obscured visual observation. The fugitive could move through this environment with confidence, while law enforcement struggled with unfamiliar and hostile territory. The task force began by studying the basin's human geography. Who lived there? Which families had been present for generations, and which were newcomers? Were there properties that could shelter someone long-term, providing food, shelter, and security while remaining hidden from casual observation? The investigation required building relationships with local residents, many of whom were suspicious of federal authority and protective of their privacy and independence. Some residents cooperated, providing information about unusual activity or strangers who had appeared in recent months. Others refused to engage with investigators, their distrust of government running deep based on historical grievances and cultural independence. A few actively resisted, warning that outsiders who ventured too deeply into certain areas might not return. Whether these warnings represented genuine territorial defense or threats on behalf of someone they were sheltering remained unclear. The first confirmed sighting came from a fisherman who reported seeing a man matching the fugitive's description at a remote camp accessible only by pirogue, the traditional flat-bottomed boats used to navigate shallow bayou waters. The fishermen described the man as being accompanied by two others who appeared to be providing security. The camp was on land owned by a family with rumored connections to smuggling operations that had operated in the region for decades. The family's patriarch had died 2 years earlier, but his sons continued running commercial fishing operations that provided legitimate income alongside whatever illegal activities they might conduct. Marshals coordinated with Louisiana State Police and local sheriff's deputies to plan an approach to the camp. The operation required boats and personnel familiar with swamp navigation. Any approach would be detected well before law enforcement could reach the camp, giving the fugitive time to flee deeper into the swamp. The decision was made to establish surveillance from a distance, using elevated positions and long-range optics to confirm the fugitive's presence before attempting apprehension. For 2 weeks, teams rotated through observation posts positioned in tree stands and on platforms built to elevation, where they could see the camp through gaps in vegetation. The surveillance was miserable work. Summer heat exceeded 100 degrees with humidity that made breathing feel like drowning. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds so thick that exposed skin was covered within seconds. Venomous snakes were common, including water moccasins and copperheads that could kill if medical treatment was not immediately available. The teams endured these conditions while watching a camp where activity was minimal, and confirmation of the fugitive's presence remained elusive. The breakthrough came when aerial surveillance using thermal imaging detected heat signatures at the camp during early morning hours. Analysis showed patterns consistent with 3 individuals, one of whom remained inside the main structure, while 2 others maintained perimeter security. The pattern suggested the central figure was high value, someone being protected rather than a typical camp resident. Combined with the fisherman's report, this was sufficient to justify a tactical operation. The approach began at 3 in the morning, during a new moon, when darkness was total. Marshals and state police tactical teams moved through the swamp in boats with muffled motors, navigating by GPS and night vision equipment. The journey covered 8 miles from the nearest road access point, weaving through channels that were sometimes barely wider than the boats themselves. Spanish moss hung from cypress trees like curtains, forcing teams to push through barriers that soaked them with swamp water and whatever organisms lived in it. The camp appeared suddenly as teams rounded a bend in the bayou. Lights were visible inside the main structure, a cabin built on pilings to elevate it above seasonal flooding. 2 smaller structures flanked the main building, likely storage and sleeping quarters for security personnel. Surveillance had identified 3 individuals, but teams prepared for possibility of additional occupants who might have arrived after the most recent observations. Tactical teams moved into position simultaneously, approaching from water and land to surround the camp. When everyone was positioned, loudspeakers shattered the pre-dawn silence with commands to surrender. The response was immediate gunfire from multiple positions. The fugitive security team had detected the approach and prepared an ambush, their weapons including automatic rifles that tore through vegetation and forced tactical teams to seek cover behind cypress stumps and elevated ground. The firefight lasted 7 minutes. Law enforcement had superior numbers and training, but the security team had defensive positions and intimate knowledge of the terrain. They used the environment expertly, firing from behind cover and moving through the swamp with ease that suggested they had prepared for exactly this scenario. Eventually, overwhelming firepower and tactical coordination allowed marshals to suppress the defensive fire and move closer to the structures. One security guard was killed during the exchange. The other surrendered when tactical teams breached his position, but the main cabin was empty. The fugitive had escaped during the firefight, fleeing through a rear exit into the swamp where darkness and vegetation provided concealment. K-9 units attempted to track him, but lost the scent in water that he had apparently used to break the trail. By the time dawn broke, the fugitive had vanished into terrain where he could move with confidence, while pursuers struggled with every step. The manhunt shifted into a new phase. The fugitive was now known to be in a specific region, but that region was vast and offered countless hiding places. He had demonstrated willingness to employ armed security and engage in firefights with law enforcement, making any future encounter potentially lethal. The task force expanded, bringing in additional personnel, including local guides who knew the swamp and could advise on likely routes and hiding places. Intelligence gathering focused on identifying who might be providing support. The camp's owners were arrested and charged with harboring a fugitive. Under interrogation, one admitted that the fugitive had been staying at the camp for 3 months, paying substantial sums for security and discretion. He claimed not to know where the fugitive might flee, but provided names of other families in the basin who had connections to smuggling operations and might offer sanctuary. Marshals began systematic visits to these families, conducting interviews and searches where warrants could be obtained. Most residents claimed no knowledge of the fugitive, their denials impossible to disprove without evidence. A few acknowledged seeing strangers in the area, but could not, or would not, provide useful details about locations or identities. The investigation was grinding and frustrating, each day burning resources while the fugitive remained free. The next confirmed sighting came from an unexpected source. A wildlife officer conducting routine patrol encountered a camp that had not been there during his previous visit to the area. 2 weeks earlier, the camp appeared hastily constructed, but showed signs of occupancy, including recent cooking and supplies that suggested someone was living there semi-permanently. The officer noted the location and reported it to the task force without approaching closely or alerting whoever might be present. Surveillance was established, and within 48 hours, thermal imaging confirmed a single occupant. Comparison of movement patterns to previous surveillance suggested this might be the fugitive, now operating alone after his security team was killed or captured. The decision was made to move quickly before he relocated again. A smaller team was assembled for rapid insertion, trading overwhelming force for speed and stealth. The apprehension attempt began at dawn. Marshals approached through waist-deep water, moving slowly to avoid creating ripples that might alert the target. As they closed to within 50 yards, the camp's occupant emerged from a tent and began preparing to break camp. Through binoculars, marshals confirmed it was the fugitive. The team moved to intercept, emerging from vegetation with weapons drawn and commands to surrender. The fugitive ran, not toward deeper swamp, but toward a pirogue tied at the water's edge. He reached the boat and began pushing off before marshals could close the distance. The boat slid into the bayou, and the fugitive grabbed a paddle, moving with practiced strokes that suggested extensive experience with swamp navigation. Marshals fired warning shots, but held aimed fire due to uncertainty about what lay beyond the fugitive in the thick vegetation. The pursuit continued by boat, with marshals in a motorized craft chasing the fugitive's human-powered pirogue through narrow channels. The fugitive had skill and knowledge of the terrain, taking routes that maximized his advantages. He navigated through areas where submerged logs and shallow water made motor use impossible, forcing marshals to paddle while he maintained his lead. For 30 minutes, the chase wound through increasingly narrow waterways until the fugitive made a critical error. He turned into a channel that appeared to offer escape, but actually ended in a dead end, where vegetation had grown so thick that passage was impossible. Realizing his mistake, he attempted to turn back, but marshals had closed the distance. Surrounded and with no escape route, he finally surrendered. Raising his hands and acknowledging that continued flight was futile, medical evaluation after his capture revealed he had lost significant weight during his time in the swamp. Insect bites covered his arms and legs, some infected from inadequate treatment. He showed signs of dehydration and exhaustion from weeks of living in harsh conditions with minimal resources. But he remained defiant, refusing to answer questions about his network or the support he had received from local residents. Extradition to federal custody occurred immediately. The fugitive was transported to a facility designed for high-security defendants, where he would await trial on charges that carried mandatory life imprisonment. Security protocols reflected his demonstrated capability to escape and his access to resources that might enable rescue attempts. Every movement was monitored, every communication screened, every visitor carefully vetted. The trial lasted 3 months, with prosecutors presenting testimony from cooperating cartel members who described the fugitive's role in coordinating trafficking operations. Financial experts traced billions of dollars through accounts he controlled. Law enforcement officers testified about violence attributed to his organization, including murders of rivals and witnesses. The evidence was overwhelming, documenting a criminal empire that had operated with near impunity for over a decade. The defense argued that the fugitive was being scapegoated for a larger organization's crimes, and that evidence against him was tainted by unreliable witnesses seeking reduced sentences. But wiretap recordings captured his voice discussing specific shipments and enforcement actions. Financial records showed him receiving percentages of proceeds from trafficking operations. The jury convicted him on all 68 counts after deliberating for 2 days. Sentencing occurred 3 months later. The judge imposed 10 consecutive life terms plus 400 years, ensuring the fugitive would die in prison regardless of appeals or any future sentence modifications. Additional charges were filed in 4 other federal districts, creating backup convictions that would survive even successful appeals in the initial case. The cartel he led was effectively dismantled, its leadership imprisoned, and its operations disrupted by sustained law enforcement pressure. For the Louisiana communities where the manhunt occurred, the fugitive's capture brought mixed reactions. Some residents were relieved that a dangerous criminal had been removed. Others resented the law enforcement presence that disrupted their lives and treated them with suspicion. The families who had provided sanctuary faced federal charges, their involvement in harboring a fugitive resulting in prison sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The Atchafalaya Basin returned to its normal rhythms after the manhunt concluded. Fishermen resumed their work without encountering tactical teams conducting searches. Tourists returned to areas that had been closed during operations. But law enforcement maintained enhanced surveillance Recognizing that the swamp's characteristics that made it ideal for the fugitive's concealment also made it attractive to other criminals seeking to avoid capture. The task force that conducted the manhunt received commendations for their work. Operating in the swamp had required adaptations to standard procedures and acceptance of conditions that tested physical and mental endurance. The successful apprehension validated their approach, demonstrating that even in terrain that heavily favored fugitives, determined law enforcement could ultimately prevail through patience and systematic pressure. Analysts studied the manhunt for lessons applicable to future operations. The importance of local knowledge became clear. Without guides who understood the swamp, the manhunt would have been impossible. The value of patience was reinforced. Rushing operations in unfamiliar terrain risked casualties and allowed fugitives to escape. The need for specialized equipment, from boats designed for shallow water to protective gear against insects and snakes, shaped procurement decisions for future operations in similar environments. The cartel that the fugitive led fragmented after his imprisonment. Lower-level operatives either surrendered to authorities or were absorbed into rival organizations. Trafficking routes he controlled were contested in violence that killed dozens before new equilibria emerged. Law enforcement viewed this disruption as success, even though it did not end drug trafficking entirely. Removing a major player created opportunities to further degrade the networks that supplied American drug markets. For the fugitive, life in a supermax facility meant isolation approaching total sensory deprivation. His cell measured 7 by 12 feet. He was allowed outside for 1 hour daily in a cage slightly larger than his cell. All communication occurred through barriers, with no physical contact with guards or other inmates. This existence, designed to prevent escape and eliminate violence, would continue until death. His appeals were systematically denied by courts that found no error in his conviction and no grounds for reducing his sentences. The families who harbored him struggled with the consequences of their decisions. Some maintained they had no choice, that refusing the fugitives' requests would have resulted in violence against them. Others admitted they were motivated by money, payments that exceeded what they could earn through legitimate activities. All faced years in federal prison, their families disrupted and their reputations destroyed within communities where trust and reputation were essential for survival. Intelligence gathered during the manhunt revealed connections between the fugitives' organization and other criminal enterprises operating in the Gulf Coast region. Follow-up investigations targeted these connections, resulting in additional arrests and prosecutions. The manhunt's impact rippled through criminal networks, demonstrating that even cartel leaders with vast resources could not escape accountability if they remained in U.S. territory. The swamp where the fugitive hid remains largely unchanged. Cypress trees still rise from dark water. Spanish moss still hangs in curtains, and wildlife still moves through an environment that has existed in similar form for thousands of years. The camps where he stayed have been dismantled, but the locations remain accessible to anyone with knowledge and equipment to navigate the challenging terrain. Local residents rarely speak about the manhunt, treating it as an episode best forgotten. Some profited from providing supplies and information to law enforcement. Others resented the intrusion and maintained suspicions about federal intentions in the region. These divisions reflect longer historical tensions between insular communities and outside authority, dynamics that predate the fugitive and will persist long after his imprisonment is forgotten. For law enforcement, The case demonstrated that geography creates challenges, but does not prevent successful pursuit of determined fugitives. The swamp's complexity was overcome through adaptation, local partnerships, and willingness to operate in conditions that tested personnel limits. Future fugitives who believe remote terrain guarantees safety may reconsider. After studying how this manhunt concluded, the fugitive sits in his cell, his empire destroyed, and his freedom permanently revoked. The swamp that briefly sheltered him continues its eternal cycles, indifferent to human dramas played out within its boundaries. Law enforcement maintains presence in the region, watching for signs that other criminals might seek the same sanctuary. And the families who provided shelter face years of imprisonment. Their choices made for money or fear, resulting in consequences that will define their lives.